Very good afternoon to all. Today, I, Professor Anuradha Jain, will be discussing with you consumption function. It's a very important topic under macroeconomics. Now, you know that consumption is an integral component of aggregate demand, and consumption function is the functional relationship between consumption and national income, because you know that all the consumption depends upon the level of income, and the assumption of the Keynesian consumption function is that consumption increases with the increase in income. However, it is to be noted that the increase in consumption is slower than the increase in the income, because we will not spend the entire increase in income, and therefore the growth of consumption is less than the growth of the income, national income or the individual income. Now, the reason behind this is that consumers consume only a proportional part of their income. This is also known as psychological law of consumption, because this is the psychology of the consumer that they will not consume the entire income on their consumption. The consumption function is mathematically represented by consumption equation. Now, Keynes' psychological law of consumption function forms the basis of the consumption function, and this was the first law given by the Keynes regarding the relationship between income and the level of consumption. This law states that people are disposed to increase their consumption as income increases, but not as much as the increase in the income. It means that, in other words, you can say that as income increases, consumption also increases, but not at the same rate. Or in other words, that the increase in the consumption is less than the increase in the income. The law implies that there is a tendency to spend on consumption to a lesser extent than the full increment of their income. And there are three main propositions of this law. The first proposition states that when income increases, consumption expenditure also increases, but at a smaller amount. And as we discussed, that the reason for this is that as income increases, the consumer becomes more and more satiated with the consumption, such that after a point, his desire to consume more starts declining. And this proposition is also known as diminishing marginal propensity to consume. This does not mean that consumption declines with income. Only the additional consumption due to further increase in income declines. And this means that consumption expenditure increases with increase in income, but less than proportionately. So, I would like to just explain you again in simple words that as income increases, the total expenditure may increase of the consumer, but as income increases, increase in consumption is less than the increase in the income. So, therefore, their marginal propensity to consume goes down as the income increases. The second proposition states that increased income will always be divided in some proportion between consumption and savings, because the total income Y is equal to C plus S, and therefore the total income or increase in income is also divided into two parts, that is consumption and savings. And this follows from the first proposition, because when entire income is not consumed, the remaining income is saved by the consumer. So, in this way, consumption and savings tend to move together, because if Y is equal to C plus S, or increase in income is equal to increase in consumption plus increase in savings, and as we know that increase in consumption is less than the increase in income, so therefore there is some part of this income which is saved. So, total savings also increases when income increases along with the consumption. And the third proposition says that with increase in income, both consumption as well as savings certain to increase. So, it is not likely that only either one of them increases. Now, what are the assumptions of this Keynesian psychological law of consumption? First assumption is constant psychological and institutional complex. That means that there is no change in the circumstances, there is no change in the income distribution, taste, habits, social customs, price movements, etc., and they are remaining constant. And this constancy leads to the stability of the consumption function. That means the behavior of the consumers remain constant, it remains same, and therefore this law of psychological consumption function will imply there. Second assumption is existence of normal condition. That means there are no extraordinary circumstances like war, hyperinflation, or revolution during which people will spend their entire income, because as you know that if there is any extraordinary circumstances, if there is any natural calamities, or suppose if there is marriage at home and the circumstances are not normal, in that case the tendency is that consumer may spend the entire income or may spend even more than the income. They may have dis savings during that period. So therefore, if this Keynes psychological law of consumption function holds, then it means that there is normal condition in the economy. The another assumption is existence of laissez-faire economy. Laissez-faire economy means the free economy. There is no government interference in the economy. So this law is operative only when people are free to spend their income and there is no government intervention. There is no intervention of the government regarding the expenditure of the people. Like suppose for example, if government come out with the policy that they cannot spend their income during that particular period of time or some particular type of commodity, so in that case also it is possible that consumption may increase or may decrease, and therefore this law of psychological consumption function may not be operative in that situation. So the Keynes has assumed that there is existence of laissez-faire economy and there is no government interference in the economy. Now, if we go further, then assuming all other factors determining consumption as constant, the consumption function equation can be represented as like C is equal to A plus BY. Now, A is greater than 0 and B lies between 0 to 1. Now, what are A and B here? A is the autonomous consumption. Autonomous consumption means which is not dependent or the function of level of income, which is there even if the level of income is 0, or if income increases or decreases, this will not have any impact on A. These are autonomous consumption. It means that it may be a basic necessity which will be there even if the income is 0 or even if income increases, decreases, this level of consumption will be there. And B here is the marginal propensity to consume. That means the proportion of income that consumer will increase with the change in the income. Now, consumption at 0 income, which is known as autonomous consumption, is possible by consuming out of past savings or through the borrowing. Now, graphically, if we say when we plot this equation, that is A is equal to B, C is equal to A plus BY, then A is also known as the intercept of the consumption function line and B is the slope of the line. The marginal propensity of consumption, that is term B in this equation, represents the proportion that is consumed out of an additional unit of income. Now, for example, if an individual income increases by rupees 100 and his consumption increases by rupees 25, then what is marginal propensity to consume? It will be change in consumption divided by the change in income. That is 25, which is the increase in the consumption, divided by 100, that is the increase in the level of income. So, 25 divided by 100, that means 0.25. So, MPC or B here is 0.25, and that is what we have seen, that the value of B lies between 0 to 1. So, it will not be more than 1 or it cannot be negative. Now, in general, marginal propensity to consume is given as the ratio of the change in the consumption and the change in the income, as we have seen in the example also. So, MPC is the change in consumption divided by change in income, that we have seen in the example, that 25 divided by 100, that means 0.25. Now, this is to be contrasted with the average propensity to consume, because there are two terms which we will be using here, that is APC and MPC. Now, what is APC? APC is average propensity to consume. So, this is calculated as C upon Y, that means total consumption divided by total income, whereas MPC is the change in consumption divided by change in income. Now, you can see this graph, and in this graph you can say that we have plotted consumption, that is this line which is upward sloping. You can see that C is equal to A plus BY, and this point, this line, we are not starting from from 0, we are starting from some positive intercept, and this positive intercept is A, that is autonomous consumption. Okay, so this autonomous consumption will be there even if the income of a consumer is 0, and after that this line becomes upward sloping, which means that it is positively sloped, and the slope of this line is known as marginal propensity to consume, MPC, which is calculated as change in consumption divided by change in income. So, what we can interpret with this diagram, that as income increases, consumption also increases, but increase in consumption is not at the same rate as of increase in the income. Okay, so the slope or the value of MPC lies between 0 to 1, and as income increases, the MPC goes down, marginal propensity to consume goes down, and therefore you can see that slope also goes down. Now, since only proportion B of the income is consumed, the remaining proportion, that is 1 minus B, must be saved, assuming that there are no other uses to which income is put to. Now, since all income that is not consumed is saved, we can mathematically write as S is equal to Y minus C, because Y is equal to C plus S. So, savings will be income minus consumption. Now, substituting the consumption function into the saving function, we can write saving equation as S is equal to Y minus A minus BY, because Y minus C and C is equal to A plus BY. So, you can substitute the value of C here, and you will get that S is equal to, finally you will get S is equal to minus A plus 1 minus B into Y, where the term 1 minus B represents the marginal propensity to save. Why? Because why it is minus A intercepts under the saving, because if there is 0 income and if there is consumption, autonomous consumption, and income is 0, that means there will be dis-savings and people will have to use their savings, and therefore the intercepts become minus A over there. The amount, the value is same, but the minus, that means it will start from below that x-axis. Now, there is term related to the psychological law of consumption is the multiplier, because when there is change in income in the economy, then there is multiplier effect, and the level of income that increases is some multiple of the increase in the investment in the economy or increase in the money supply in the economy. So, the additional consumption due to 1 unit increase in income, that is MPC, also translates into income for someone else who sells that product, because you know that in the economy the expenditure of one is the income of the other. Now, if I spend money, that means that will give income to the other people, and that income, out of that income, that person will also again spend, make consumption, make expenditure in the economy. Now, for example, now person A's income increases by rupees 100, suppose. Now, he spends 0.8%, that means MPC is 0.8 to his income on a car. He purchases a car and he make consumption expenditure of 0.8% of the income. That means 80 rupees he spent in the economy. Now the seller of the car B gains this amount as additional income, out of which again suppose he spends 0.8 on the sofa set, like out of that 100 rupees increase in income of A, he spends 80 rupees. Then from whom he buys that product, that person will get income of 80 rupees, and suppose he again spent by 80%, that means rupees 64 in the economy. So this continues infinitely, and what happens now, we can mathematically represent the total increase in income as a result of an initial increase in rupees 100. So you can see here, so what will be the change in income? That means 100 initially, then 80% by A, that means 80, then 80% of that 80 by B, then it goes on. So here the total increase in income is rupees 500 due to an initial increase of rupees 100. So this means that the income increases by 5 times the initial increase, and therefore the multiplier here is 5. Now in general, how do we calculate the multiplier? The multiplier is given as 1 upon 1 minus B, and where B is the marginal propensity to consume. So in this case, how do we get 5 as multiplier? So 1 upon 1 minus 0.8, it means 1 upon 0.2, and when you solve this, then you get 5. So therefore the multiplier in this case is 5. Now what are the characteristics of the Keynesian consumption function? Aggregate real consumption expenditure is a stable function of real income. The marginal propensity to consume, MPC, or the slope of the consumption function, defined as change in consumption divided by change in income, must lie between 0 to 1. The average propensity to consume, or the proportion of income spent on consumption, defined as C by Y, should be decreasing as income increases. Why decreasing? Because MPC is decreasing there. So marginal propensity to consume itself probably decreases or remain constant as income increases. So that was about the Keynes psychological law of consumption function, but there are other theories also which are given related to consumption, and one of them is the permanent income hypothesis, because Keynes theory of consumption function was criticized by many economists, and there were many drawbacks of that theory, and there, according to other economists, then there are some other factors also on which consumption depends, not only just the level of income. So therefore after Keynes, many other theories of consumption were developed. So one of them is the permanent income hypothesis. The permanent income hypothesis was given by Milton Friedman, and it's the theory of consumer spending, which states that people will spend money at a level consistent with their expected long-term average income. So it is not just dependent upon current income or the increase in the current income, but it also depends upon their expected long-term average income. And the level of expected long-term average income then become thought of as the level of permanent income that can be safely spent by a consumer. Now a worker will save only if their current income is higher than the anticipated level of permanent income. Now in order to guard against future declines in the income, because future is uncertain. So we never know like what will happen to the level of income, whether it will increase, it will decrease, or any unexpected situation can arise, and therefore a person has to protect the future, guard the future, and therefore precautionary savings are always there, and so therefore total expenditure, total consumption may not depend upon the permanent income, may not depend upon the current income, but it also depends upon the permanent income of the consumer. Now take the example of a person who receives his salary on the first of every month. Now he cannot be expected to spend all his income in one day and not spend anything on the rest of the days, and he has to divide his salary for throughout the month, because next salary will be given only the first of the next month. So people prefer a smooth consumption flow rather than plenty today and scarcity tomorrow or yesterday. So permanent income is the steady, rate of expenditure a person could maintain for the rest of his or her life, given the present level of wealth and the income earned now and in future. So in its simplest form, the permanent income hypothesis argues that consumption is proportional to permanent income. So that means C is equal to CYP. YP here is the permanent income and C is the proportion of the permanent income that consumer will spend. Now suppose the income of a worker is expected to increase or expects to get an inheritance in the coming months. Now he may want to spend more in the current period. Now suppose if I am expecting money in future, okay, from my parents or from my relatives, then the tendency will be there that I may spend more money in the current period. Now however, in accordance with the theory, he may not increase his spending solely based on a short-term increase in income or wealth. Instead, he will maintain his current spending level and save the additional income for future consumption. Now, in this way, the consumption decisions are being guided by the permanent income rather than a transitory change in income. Now, the possession of assets by an individual is of great importance in his ability to smoothen his consumption in accordance with the permanent income. A person without any asset will anyway not consume according to his current or future income, and the hypothesis will not hold in this case. Therefore, possessing of liquid asset is a prerequisite for forming future income expectations. Another theory which explains about the consumption is the life cycle theory, life cycle hypothesis. The Keynesian consumption function assumes that an individual's current consumption is a function of his current income. But the life cycle hypothesis given by Modigliani and Ando views individual as planning their consumption and savings behavior over long periods with the intention of allocating their consumption in the best possible way over their entire lifetime. The individual plans his consumption based on his expected lifetime income, because the individual maintains a more or less constant or slightly increasing level of consumption. The individual spends on consumption either by borrowing from others or spending the assets from his parents in the early years of life. The hypothesis assumes that the lifetime of an individual is divided into three phases. One is early years, where they are using their parents' money, they are not earning anything. Then second phase is working life, where when we work we earn money, and the third is the retirement life, when we are not earning income. The person is expected to earn during his working life and consume out of savings after the retirement. Now during his working life, the consumer does not consume his entire income, but only a portion of it, and saves the rest to be consumed in the old age. A numerical example illustrates this theory. Suppose that a person starts life at age of 20. Now plan to work until age 65 and will die at the age of 80. And the annual income, suppose this person is $30,000 per month. Now lifetime resources are annual income times year of the working. So that means that is 65 minus 20. So 45 years is the working life in this example, and $30,000 into 45, that means 13,50,000 dollar that he earns, and spreading lifetime resources over the number of years of life, that means the number of years of life is 80, in which 20 years he is not earning, so that means 60 years allows for annual consumption. Okay, so average you can say is $22,500 average consumption he can consume. So in this way you can see that there are different theories given by different economists. Okay, there is like Keynes psychological law of consumption function, permanent income hypothesis theory, then there are life cycle theory, there are demonstration effect, Rashid effect. Okay, so consumption depends upon various factors, but in any theory we take, we find the net conclusion that consumption increases as income increases if there is a normal situation in the economy. Okay, and there are also other factors like aggregate consumption function of the community also affects the consumption behavior of the consumer. Okay, but as income increases, consumption increases, or if we expect that our income will increase in future, then also the tendency is that we consume more today. But according to Keynes, it says that there is a relationship between consumption and income, because before Keynes, this Adam Smith and other classical economists, they used to say that your consumption depends upon price, but Keynes was the one who came with the theory, and he says that no, your consumption depends upon the level of income rather than the price. Price can be the secondary factor, but income is the primary factor which determines the demand in the economy, which affects the consumption in the economy. Okay, so thank you so much for your patience hearing, and I hope you must have understood these basic concepts of consumption function. Thank you.